Hello, my name is Fred, and I'm an overconsumer. My goal today is to convince you that you are overconsumers too, but that collectively, by embracing the idea of sustainable consumption, we can solve our addiction and make the planet a more ecologically sustainable and equitable place. This is a bit of a tough ask for an academic like myself, because we're programmed to speak in 50-minute blocks. A philosopher friend just told me recently that it takes them 10,000 words just to clear their throats. I looked this up on a word-speech calculator. There's an online word-speech calculator. And that would take him 77 minutes. It's a lot of throat clearing. I've decided to rise to the TEDx challenge, and I've condensed my presentation into 1,900 words. That should take me about 15 minutes. And I've just one request. Please don't tell my students, because they'll want this all the time. On the 13th of April, 1970, the number 2 oxygen tank aboard the Apollo 13 spacecraft exploded, stranding the astronauts in space and giving rise to Commander James Lovell's chilling understatement, "Houston, we have a problem." Immediately thereafter, those very bright NASA scientists, working around the clock with the crew, brought them back home safely in 4 days. It's my contention that our planetary spaceship, Earth, is currently blowing some really important oxygen tanks of its own. And I'm going to focus on 3 of them. So imagine we're on a spaceship, traveling through the stars, and you're leaning back in Captain Kirk's seat, all nice and relaxed. And then suddenly, bang! Someone comes running in saying, "Houston, we've got a problem. Our oceans have just exploded." Scientists tell us that our current world fisheries are 60% fully exploited and 30% overexploited. The number of dead zones, that is, areas of lakes and oceans that don't support life because there's not enough oxygen in them, has increased from 45 to 450 in the last 50 years. Our oceans are becoming much more acidic, which has very important ramifications for fish and crustacean reproduction. And of course, our sea levels are rising because our glaciers are melting. And that's going to wipe out small island developing states and a lot of coastal communities. So just as you're digesting that information and trying to figure out what to do, another person comes running in and bang! We have another problem, Houston. Our forest's oxygen tank has just exploded. Scientists tell us that 13 million hectares of forests disappear each year on this planet. That's the equivalent of 2 Tasmanias, 20 Tasmanias in the last decade. Of particular concern is the tropical forests, because they're havens of biodiversity. And again, biologists tell us that we're currently living what's called the sixth mass extinction event. I suspect most of you weren't around during the fifth mass extinction event, because it was 65 million years ago. And it occurred when a meteor hit the Earth and destroyed the dinosaurs. From the point of view of the Earth's other species, it is us humans, Homo sapiens, that are that meteor today. Because biologists tell us that current rates of extinction are 1,000 times greater than background levels. So now, as a captain, you're a little agitated because you've just lost 2 of your oxygen tanks, but suddenly there's another bang. And another person comes in and says, Houston, we've got a third problem. Our atmosphere has just exploded. The carbon dioxide we've been pumping into the atmosphere from burning coal and oil and gas and wood is now at a very high level. In fact, in May this year, concentrations of carbon in the atmosphere exceeded 400 parts per million for the first time. At that level, scientists tell us there's a very high risk that the Earth will be 2 degrees warmer for our children and our grandchildren. And it's also leading to extreme weather events. And again, we're told we can expect more and more severe bushfires, floods, and droughts. Whoa. They didn't tell me not to come. After the Apollo spaceship had landed safely back on Earth, and after the astronauts had had a chance to rest and debrief, an inquest was held into what had happened. Commander James Lovell took his share of responsibility because he had recognized that the oxygen tank had not functioned fully properly during tests, and rather than insisting it be replaced, he had allowed it to be repaired and installed. What would we learn if we conducted an inquest into why our Earth's oxygen tanks are exploding? I think we'd learn the following. While it's not a perfect measure, ecological economists have developed something called the ecological footprint. The ecological footprint is a measure of the resources you're using to support your lifestyle. And it's measured in hectares per annum. There are 7 billion people, give or take, on the planet today. And the resources the planet can support, ecological economists tell us, is the equivalent of 2 hectares per annum, just under. Australians, Canadians, Americans, Europeans are all currently consuming, on average, 6.5 hectares per annum. And more. So if everyone was to consume as we did, we'd need 3 Earths. Now, just in case you haven't been keeping up with your astronomy and cosmology, we don't actually have 3 Earths. We have, of course, just 1 Earth. There's an equity dimension to this as well, because a Canadian study in 2008 broke down the ecological footprint consumption by deciles, 10% each of the population going from poorest to richest. And the richest 10% of the Canadian population had ecological footprints of over 12 hectares. So we're going to need 6 Earths if we're all going to live as they do. So here we have the problem. Our oxygen tanks are exploding, and it's rich world consumption that bears a substantial part of the blame. What should we do? The obvious solution to most people is to say, well, let's look to our leaders to solve this problem. We'll go and talk to the business leaders, and we'll go and talk to the politicians. Surely they can sort this out. But if you think about it, we have a big problem here. Mega corporations and business in general depends on buying and selling goods and services. That's how their system operates. And they want us to buy more goods and services, and that's why we have advertising. So if we go to business leaders and say we need to do something here, it's going to be hard for them to act. If we go to our politicians, they too have a problem. Because in modern politics, your legitimacy entirely depends on whether you can create jobs. And it's buying and selling that creates the jobs. So if our business leaders are having trouble, and if our politicians are having trouble, what are we going to do? Well, this is where you come in. What we need to do is embrace the idea of sustainable consumption and the sustainable consumption network which is currently coming into existence. You may not have heard of the concept of sustainable consumption that much, which is a little surprising because it's been around since at least 1992. In fact, if you go back and read the declaration that came out of the 1992 United Nations Conference on Environment and Development conference, it explicitly mentions sustainable consumption as a core aspect of sustainable development. What's happened, though, is that it's proved too hard for business and for politicians to deal with that. Because, as I've said, it deeply challenges the underlying logic of business and politics today. But what's been happening is that a huge number of people operating around the world as individuals and with groups have slowly put together what we might want to call a sustainable consumption network. In the food industry, for example, people are increasingly embracing veganism or vegetarianism, or even if they don't want to go that far, they're saying, well, we'll cut down on our meat consumption. The farmers' market system has exploded because people want to buy good food that's local food and reduce their food miles. People are seeking out organic produce, biodynamic produce. And a lot of people are interested in community-supported agriculture and generally the slow food movement. There's a huge amount happening on the food side. On the transportation side, there's also an incredible amount going on. Movements have sprung up to try and get you to walk to work, or to cycle, or to try and put in cycle lanes, or to try and develop better public transport. Or even if you have to drive, and some of us obviously have to drive because we're locked into complex socio-technical systems that simply mean we can't do the other things, we can buy electric cars, hybrid cars, or fuel-efficient vehicles. There's a whole range of other areas where people are becoming socially innovative and working really hard to make our consumption less and better. So what we need to do is embrace and join and grow this sustainable consumption network. If we're to stop our planetary oxygen tanks from exploding. What happened there? Ah, there he is. I'm not sure about this final image. It's designed to represent a contradiction. I think if you are going to embrace sustainable consumption, and I think probably a lot of you already are, you're already plugged into one or another component of it. Some of you might have concerns about food and want to join the slow food movement or support the farmers market or become a vegetarian. Some of you might be in the home energy area and be putting in solar panels or thinking about fuel efficient or energy efficient appliances. So I think we're all plugged into elements of it. I think what we have to do to grow it is to recognize it as a movement, embrace some of the contradictions in the movement, and use some of the savings, because you're consuming less, to invest back in the movement. And over time, this already fairly substantial movement will grow, develop, and start the process of creating a new political economic system. Okay, as I said, there's a contradiction. Oh, don't cough. The contradiction's this: it may simply not be feasible to achieve this in the next decade. And the reasons are that we're locked into these complex socio-technical arrangements that we've inherited from the past and that we can't do anything about. For some people, this is a reason not to bother at all. It's all too big, all too difficult. We'll just go on going on. But of course, if we've all adopted the logic that if you can't be a saint, you have to be the devil, then the world would be an awful place indeed. And between being a saint and being a devil, there's a whole huge room for improvement. There's lots you can do and lots we need to do. So I'll end where I started. My name is Fred, and I'm an overconsumer. But I'll be overconsuming less tomorrow than I did today. And I invite you to join me on that journey. Thank you.